It's the Mornings on Horseback podcast. Now, here's your host, Kevin Meyer.
In the last few years, there's been much talk about emotional support animals, to the point that not only has the subject become a bit of a punchline for jokes, but also the debate on the floor of more than one state legislative body. Upon reflection, I have come to believe that the ranching and cowboy culture were the forefathers of the support animal phenomenon. If a person were to travel through ranch country, east to west and north to south, they would observe on almost every outfit an old pensioner horse in the pasture, sway backed with swollen arthritic knees, his years of service and sacrifice being rewarded by living out his remaining days relaxing in the sun. A longhorn steer, many years past being a palatable freezer beef, ignored on the balance sheets due to the fact that he will eat cake out of your hand and a curiosity of just how long his horns will grow. An old broken mouth cow long past her breeding prime, but still of value in that she will adopt any lappy calf in need of a mother, or perhaps 3 or 4 a year, or that she was the last cow that your grandfather kept as a replacement. Of course, there is the ever present cow dog, or dogs, trailing along behind as morning chores are done, riding in the side by side, on the pickup bed, on the feed wagon, ever present and attentive on even the largest of circles, anticipating and awaiting the next opportunity to be of help. And inevitably, there is the small wooden cross, or perhaps nondescript rock marking the spot where a favorite horse or dog was laid to its final rest under a tree on the hill, or on a high spot where they can eternally watch over the outfit. There is an argument, I would propose, that all of the animals a cowboy interacts with support his psyche to some degree. The horse he rides, the cows he tends, the dogs he depends on, the wildlife he observes. Many is the shipping corral I have been in when a vehicle pulls up and an elderly man emerges from the passenger seat, slow and unsteady, shuffling with the help of a cane and perhaps a guiding arm from a loved one, making his way to the side of the loading chute where a gleam returns to his eye and a smile to his face. His support being the sight and smells of cattle and horses, the sounds of the gates and the trucks, and the calls of the crew through the haze of dust, recalling in his mind days gone by, good times and a life well lived, finding comfort in being part of shipping one more time. The emotional support that a cowboy garners from his livestock seems to be less that they are with him at all times, and more that when he is separated from them, he takes comfort in knowing that they are at home waiting for him. The most fulfilling aspect of life is knowing that there is a purpose to it. Perhaps that purpose is the underlying support that all those with an attachment to animals finds, whether or not they start their mornings on horseback. Hey gang, welcome to the Mornings on Horseback podcast. We hope this finds you in good health and high spirits, if for no other reason the Chinook that has blessed so much of the West. If you or anyone you know involved in the ranching, agriculture, or horse training industries has suffered an injury or tragedy, please visit hcmbbf.org and apply for emergency aid. The Hal Coker Memorial Buckaroo Benefit Fund is a 501c3 charity set up to help those in need get through the hard times, whether it be helping with medical bills, vehicle payments, or even feed to get livestock through the winter. At hcmbbf.org, you can apply for aid or make a tax-deductible donation to help the cause. If you enjoy our podcast, please share it with your friends and leave a rating and a review. Today is part 2 of my conversation with AQHA President Jim Hunt. We pick up where we left off discussing the purpose of the AQHA.
because again, I think what the forefathers, kind of like our country, what they initially developed and stated, it was the original purpose of the American Quarter Horse as a breed registry. It was right on target. It's what we needed, and we have tried to refocus on that, and they have brought back in not just Jim Hunt, but other breeders like myself that have been willing to step up and say, okay, if I can, through my history and my upbringing, if I can help, bring to light some good principles back onto the table, that we can, we need to get our association back to what it was meant to be. And it was meant to be a breed registry, not a show management outfit. Because, and here's what we've done now, Kevin, in the last recent 2, 3, 4 years. Now the AQHA, other than we still have the AQHA World Show, and it's a struggle to keep it going because of what it takes to, the AQHA was not meant to be a show management outfit, and so we keep it going because we have members that we try to be respectful to, and we want to have this World Show event to meet their needs and their desires. But what Jim Hunt hasn't been able to bring to the table, just as advice, I didn't, it is nothing. I couldn't do none of it without the rest of the executive committee agreeing, and some of our employees, such as our wagon boss Carl Stressman, recently helping achieve this. And that is, okay, gentlemen and ladies, we need to go to these associations that left the AQHA, went around them. They still need the American Quarter Horse, and they're still competing on them, especially the NCHA and the Snaffle Bit and the Teamer Open Series and all that. But we don't want to go take over their shows or even be a part of it. But let's go recognize the success of those quarter horses in their events. Let's go to the National Finals Rodeo, and let's get them to make medicine and say, you know what? What would it take to get you guys to make the American Quarter Horse the official horse of the NFR? Mm-hmm. They did it this year. Just begun that. Let's go to the timed event championship in Guthrie, Oklahoma. What is it going to take for us to let the AQHA recognize a top horse each evening in their competition and give them an AQHA trophy and recognize the animal? Let's go to the Calgary Stampede, which I did, and I went to this Calgary committee and I said, what would it take? You guys recognize, the top athlete in all your rough stock events and your timed events. You give them a $50,000 bonus at the end of the rodeo. What about our equine athlete in the timed events? That calf roper, that barrel racer, that steer wrestler, they wouldn't get out. They wouldn't even have a shot if it wasn't for their dancing partner. Mm-hmm. They liked it. Next year, you will see at the Calgary Stampede 3 equine athletes that are going to be recognized with, I don't think they're going to, we're trying to get them to do the $50,000 bonus for the horses, just like they do the contestants. But I think we're going to get 25 out of them, and they'll split it between the breeder and the owner of the horse. The vision that Jim Hunt had was, let's recognize the success of these equine athletes so the breeder gets recognition. And then you got a story about the horse, who bred him, how he's bred, who his sire was, genetics. That will add value to those animals. So we're not producing those shows, and they're not going to come to the AQHA. They quit that years ago. AQHA's got to go to them. Mm-hmm. Did the same thing in the National High School Rodeo Association. We went to the National High School Rodeo Finals last 2 years now, and it used to be they did a boys' horse of the year and a girls' horse of the year. Last year I got Carl to agree, our CEO, and said, Carl, I know I can get some breeders to help sponsor. And we gave those kids in each timed event, goat tying horse, breakaway horse, calf roping horse, steer wrestling horse. They got an AQHA coveted bronze statue of the American Quarter Horse and a $1,500 scholarship check. And of course, the horse is based upon points that those kids come in there and get. And the horse has to be a registered quarter horse, and the kid has to be a youth member of the AQHA. So we're creating a desire to want to be, again, re-engaged with our breed association. And I did the same thing at the national intercollegiate level. Not just a boy's horse and a girl's horse now. It's a horse in every event because we're so specialized.
Yes.
And these horses have gifts and talents like people in different areas. AQHA's job is to recognize that success wherever it's at. And it's not just Western pleasure or English riding or whatever. The foundation, the original American quarter horse, was founded upon ranch needs, cow horse needs.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we've tried to get back to.
Well, to your point, and I'm so glad to hear you talk about what you have been about getting back to the basics of what the breed association was meant for. I reached out to some friends getting ready for this interview and said, if you had the opportunity to ask the president of the AQHA one question, what would it be? 95% of the questions I got back were about showing and show issues.
Mm-hmm.
And I really do believe that there is a certain aspect where that's just now what people think of when they think of the AQHA past, you got to send in your paperwork so you can get your registration papers back. And then it's all about, thinking about the show world.
Yeah. Yeah. And that observation is 100% correct. And again, I think that if you, the AQHA let me form a ranching committee. Then they let me form a ranching council. And back in 1992, they developed what was supposed to have become the most prestigious recognition award that AQHA presents, and it's called the Remuda Award. The first recipient of that Remuda Award was the Haythorne Ranch in Nebraska, Craig Haythorne, at Waldo and Craig Haythorne and their family. And it's continued. Well, as time went on, it used to be that they tried to incorporate that effort with some of the cattle associations, like NCBA and stock growers and different ones, and they would ask for them. You had to be the nomination process, and to keep the cow and the ranch in it, you had to be nominated by a member of the NCBA or stock growers or something. Well, as time went on, like Haythorns, like Terry Stewart Forrest, like Stan Weaver, like the ones that now I've gotten engaged, and I put those individuals, took me 2 years. Would you, Craig Haythorne? Would you, Terry Stewart Forrest? Would you, Martha Armitage? Would you, Mike Miller? Would you, from up there in Idaho, two-time world champion big loop rope, McKenzie, Wani McKenzie, would you consider serving on this ranching council? Well, what am I going to do? We need to purify the importance of proper recognition. To get the Remuda Award today, you have to be nominated by a previous Remuda Award winner, and you have to be accepted by this 9-person ranching council.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because we lost the value, the importance of being a Remuda Award honoree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that is what I've been able to bring to the table. Again, when I got engaged with AQHA, I was very quick to see that there's a big water and vinegar deal there. The show people are show people, and the ranch people are ranch people. And they don't have a lot in common.
Mm-hmm.
They have the horse in common, but what they see as value in that horse being a friend or being entertainment or a necessity, there's a big difference.
Mm-hmm.
Huge.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of those individuals that probably came along late in life in the AQHA, and for whatever, I'm the first South Dakotan to ever be on the executive committee, and I'm the first tribal member to ever be on the executive committee. Why? I can't answer that one, other than, I was able to bring Carl Stressman on board to, be our CEO for a few years. AQHA is growing in numbers. People are cautious. like what you said, some of your people that ask you questions, well, looks like all I'm good for is registering horses and paying bills, and they're catering to the show people. That was, and still probably can appear to be a true statement at times. But we are making a change. We are making a difference, and we do have a very, very active ranching emphasis movement again. That appreciator, the foundation of the AQHA, the American Quarter Horse, is a ranch horse athlete, and I just hope they keep it going.
Well, and I can tell you that from my experience, having one foot in both of those worlds, the ranching world and the show world, is I think a lot of people miss the opportunities that are right in front of them because so much is going back to the pedigree thing is they think they have to have a horse bred a certain way to go win the horse show.
Yeah.
And the way that we're breeding the ranch horses now, there's no reason that they can't go and win a lot of these ranch classes. Now, if you talk about the cutting and the reining, that's going to be a different deal because that's become so specialized and honed to a fine point. But all of these new ranch classes that have just exploded in popularity, there's no reason that these so-called ranch bred horses couldn't go be successful for people in that situation.
Right on. And that is, one of the areas, that's the newest segment. And interesting enough, what is keeping these AQHA shows, and they've died out like you can't believe in the last 7-8 years. There used to be, South Dakota, used to have 38 shows a year in this state, quarter horse shows. Well, primarily Western pleasure, halter, English riding, there were some, and then there were some roping and so on and so forth, but primarily shows. Well, they died out. They've come back in popularity again. You know why? Ranch horse classes, ranch riding, ranch trail. It had the word ranch. So we have been successful at re-engaging the need for and the people's desire. They want to look at hat sales and boot sales and chap sales and spur sales and saddle sales and and it's ranch. And so, well, Yellowstone's part of that. Or that movement, that type of Hollywood, which that's not the real deal, by the way. But anyhow, it's still, yes, people, flattery of our way of life. People want to connect with that, and so and it takes a good horse to do that, like we talked before. So, the ranch title is, the ranch horse has, again, that is what is now upholding the success of a horse show, of a horse show being, got done with the Black Hill Stock Show. 70 and 80 in each of those ranch classes, and there might be 6 or 7 in a halter class, 6 or 7 in a Western pleasure class. That's just reality. I don't like to see anybody, some of my Western pleasure people, and I say because I'm in charge. When you get involved, you have to do your best to meet the needs of all venues.
Yeah.
They're disappointed. They're fearful that their enjoyment of the horse, Western pleasure, is going to be no more, fairly soon, just because of, dollars and cents. And in turn, what you're seeing is now you're seeing some of these Western pleasure horses throw a saddle on them and a pair of tanks, and they're trying to, stay involved just by putting the term ranch on it. So those are the areas where the Ranching Council and the Ranching Committee and those that we've reformed, they're fairly new in the last 8-9 years, to protect the dignity and the integrity of the ranch horse. And that is the one thing as I leave AQHA this year at this level that I've worked very hard and this group to you got to maintain the reality. No different than that Remuda Award. We took away the aspect to where you could nominate your own ranch. You can't nominate yourself. That never was a cowboy way. Your neighbor has to nominate you. In other words, another past Remuda Award winner has to feel that you're validated as that to be considered for that recipient. And then the judges is that ranching council that are all 50-year breeders or more and a Remuda Award winner as well. And so it is really special to earn that Remuda Award today.
That's great. And that's the way it should be, because just going back to being a cowboy is and going from place to place, that's how a place was judged. The first question was not, how's the food, how's the bunkhouse? The question was, how are the horses?
Yeah. One of the other things that I there's things bounce around in my head here is, the question was, well, then how did somebody like you and your wife, get involved with AQHA? We were just like a lot of your other people that you say, what question would you ask the president of AQHA? The same question that I would have asked Frank Merrill years ago, or Johnny Trotter years ago, or, some of those past presidents that have really become good friends. And yet I probably still don't think exactly like they do, but they have become good friends because they were accepting of an old Indian kid. I'm a nobody. I mean, I don't have oil wells, and I've been very blessed. I got a beautiful family and got get and live on the ranch and raise my family the way I grew up. And those are the prayers and the things that I asked for, and they've been given to me. I'm very wealthy that way. However, when I'm asked, years ago, I got so frustrated with the American Quarter Association because I send in 115 to 120 colt applications, and the only thing they want is more pictures and a check. And, register my colts. And what am I getting out of the deal? Other than just paying the bill.
Mm-hmm.
And you get frustrated. So anyhow, my dad, who had he was a 50, 60, then almost 70-year breeder before he died. He said, well, quit your belly aching and do something about it. If you've been asked to get involved, then get involved. And I was reading the Western Horseman one day, this is probably 11, 12 years ago now, and I was not involved with AQHA. But Don Treadway and Johnny Trotter had flown up here. And the president at that time was a man by the name of Johannes Urkeldinger. He was from Germany, the first international member to ever become president of AQHA. And Johannes apparently recognized the need. He was the first one to recognize the need that AQHA needs to step back and go back out and reach out to these breeders, these foundation ranch breeders, and see if we can't reunite their devotion to the association. So they came to South Dakota, and long story short, asked if welcome, thank you for registering your, raising good horses. Would you, we could use somebody like you to get involved. Would you consider it, on and on? And over that 2-year period. Well, one night, I was kicking all this around and thinking, why do I want to get involved? Something that my dad's frustrated with, and my granddad, it's not the same AQHA that when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And the papers had value back when I was a kid. My granddad, had a little safe, and he had that notebook full of them papers. And boy, people would come look at these horses and look at here what I got, and he'd chew tobacco, plugged tobacco, and he'd spit a little. Look at here, look at what I got here. The papers had value. Well, we'd lost that atmosphere, and and then I was laying in, getting ready to go to bed one night, and I was watching some news and opened the Western Horseman and looking, and there was an advertisement for an adoption program for wild Mustangs, and it was for kids, for youth.
Mm-hmm.
And I was looking at that, and I was thinking about, it's 100 and whatever it was, 125 or $150 or whatever for this, minimal fee, and these young kids could adopt this wild Mustang, and it looks so. And at that time, there was a lot of us breeders in this country. You have all these foals, and you have a production sale, and the nice, solid bays, sorrels, average color, well bred, nice, all registered American quarter horse foals. Sometimes you might not get $200 or $300 for them foals, and by the time you paid all the registration costs, cost you money to raise them.
Mm-hmm.
And then here I open up this Western Horseman, and they're giving away these inbred, ill-minded, worthless, and the taxpayers are paying to fund this deal. That means me.
Yeah.
And I'm paying to take care of these Mustangs. Can't even get $300 or $400. We did. But a lot of my neighbors that were, had 20 or 30 colts or whatever, and take them to Mandan or take them to, a consignment sale, and just come home crying because all that work, and they had to end up writing the sale barn a check for expenses.
Yeah.
And good colts, good ranch bred colts. And yet then they had to turn around and pay another check, their tax dollars, paying for the care of these Mustangs. And now we're giving them to kids.
Mm-hmm.
And it just I couldn't sleep for a couple of days. Finally Joni, she said, "What is bothering you?" And I said, "This is just wrong." And so I said, "You know what? Somebody's got to step up and make a difference here." I said, "Would you be okay if I called Don Treadway, who then was CEO at AQHA?" He came up here and introduced himself, and he said, of course he left. "If there's anything I can do for you, we appreciate you breeders." See, they were trying to reach out and make headway again. So I called him, and if I remember right, he wasn't available right away, but he returned my call. And I said, "Mr. Treadway, I'm a ranch breeder, and I'm ashamed of what the way our breeders and this quality livestock. We had a son of Sugar Bars, we had a grandson of King 234, we had, and we're proud of what we produce. We're very selective." And yet I'm ashamed, especially for my neighbors, that they can't even raise a quality American quarter horse and get paid for what they're producing. And yet we're giving away these wild Mustangs. If we're going to do this, would you accept 6 colts from Jim and Joni Hunt? I would like to give to the American Quarter Horse Association 6 quality foals. And you have a youth department. You got kids that are, and in my whole life, I've never seen a kid that wasn't interested in horses. You take them down to the corral, and they get in a pen of horses, and that kid just smile and want to pet it, want to touch it, want to be with it. They want to know more about it. The ones that are really driven towards a horse. I said, I just know that you'd get applications. Would AQHA, I'd like AQHA to get the credit for providing quality, well-bred, registered foals for these kids to choose from, instead of them opening up another equine magazine and getting an opportunity to go throw a wild, ill-minded, crooked-legged Mustang in their backyard.
Yeah.
And so, anyhow, he got the picture, and he said, "Well, I got to talk to the executive committee." Well, about a week later, he called me back, and he said, we're going to take you up on your offer. So Joni and I, that first year, awarded 6 registered foals to kids that AQHA picked, and they developed a process that you send in an application, and you got to prove that you can take care of the foal, and your parents will let you have the foal, and then you got to do a progress report month by month, and and it's a registered foal, and then that kid gets to name the colt, register the colt, go through all the process, and learn what it is to be an AQHA breeder. And Kevin, that move, that gesture, call it whatever you want to like, that vision has now grown to where AQHA is doing 35 to 45 foals a year.
That's outstanding.
And we get more applications than we have colts every year. And that's been going on since, I think, 2010 or 11, whatever year that they came up here that first time. Yeah. And Joni and I, have still do our 4 to 6 colts a year, depending on the colt crop. But usually it's 5 or 6. And numbers that I don't even. People say, well, how many foals have you donated now all these years? I don't even know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't keep track because we do. I followed the footsteps of 2 other very important men in my life. Well, 3. Casey Tibbs, who always was extremely partial to youth. He gave more away than he ever received. In spite of a lot of the things that, that we grew up hearing about the wild side of Casey, and a lot of that is true. But the good side, or the side that man had the biggest heart of anybody I ever, I spent 3 years of my childhood with him because of the relationship with my grandfather. And then my grandfather, he always donated foals to 4-H groups and so forth. And then my father followed suit. And so that was already a gesture that, that we were accustomed to, that, if you got something, if you're going to give a gift, don't give a reject, give a good one. And if you're going to give a gift, do it with the intention of making a difference in that kid or that person's life. And anyhow, I am so pleased that this now called the Young Horse Development Program started with that vision, those first 6 colts that Joni and I gave. And as a result of that, now we have breeders across the nation and Canada and Mexico that are contributing colts from their breeding programs. And in fact, that's even become somewhat now of a competition because, I got neighbors or people that say, well, I can't have him giving a better one than me, and I'm going to get, and because they want to get those foals into kids' hands and watch them, grow up and develop and mature, and it's really been successful. Yeah.
That's great. That's awesome. I've heard of that program. Mainly I heard through it because a young lady came and asked me for some help with her horse, because I think part of that program is they have to go and visit an AQHA professional horseman.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's
well,
correct.
I'm the closest thing. I don't have my professional horseman card anymore, but I used to have it, and people knew about it. And since there was no one else close to AQHA, told him, yeah, Kevin will work. That'll be fine if you go to Kevin's house.
Yeah.
So that was great.
Yeah. So, and thank you for doing that. And that part of it was not my original vision. My original vision is getting an opportunity for young people that just crave to own their own American quarter horse or a quality animal.
Mm-hmm.
And what's available? These inbred reject Mustangs that you and I as producers, we're competing against ourselves. We're trying to produce our own quality livestock, and yet paying to feed our government, paying the taxpayers, paying these inbred things, and we're charging these kids
mm-hmm.
$125, where we can't even hardly get that for our own quality generations of breeding behind them.
Mm-hmm.
Anyhow, enough of that. But the other product of that is, now I know of, I think there's 7 or 8 of those kids, some of those original participants, that are now national directors in the AQHA.
Oh, that's really great.
2 of them ended up, the Sierra Walter from Oklahoma, and then this Hines from Kansas. They went on and became president of the AQHA Youth Association, and now, of course, yes, now national directors. But so it is went way beyond what we thought that an impact that it could have and might have, and so that's part of what they got when they asked me to get involved. And it's not my deal. It's been a God thing. It really has, and to be involved in with an association that I think was still trying to refine its way, and we're still a long ways from what it probably needs to be. But I am proud of I think I will have left it better than I found it in many ways.
And that's really all a person can strive for, is to leave things better than the way we found them. And I think you really have done a great job, and I think you're on the right track with everything that you're saying. Okay, so, and I've taken up so much of your time, but I've really enjoyed this conversation. I do have one hot topic that I really wanted to talk to you about from the AQHA standpoint, is the Horse Protection Act.
Yes.
And how they were trying to expand it. Now, of course, things kind of changed here very recently with the election and whatnot, but I know that there has been so much misinformation about the Horse Protection Act, and also misinformation about what the AQHA's stand and response has been. So, since I have you here, let's talk about the HPA a little bit.
So the Horse Protection Act, again, was established in 1970. And this Horse Protection Act has been on the books, in law, if you will, since 1970. And, of course, it was established and brought to fruition because of the inhumane training practices that were utilized in the saddlebreds and the Tennessee walkers, and they used weights and correct incorrect hoof shoeing practices and so forth to change the gait of these horses. Mm-hmm. And in 1970, there was in fact even some quarter horse members, AQHA members and so forth, that came to the agreement that we need to get some legislation passed to outlaw these practices. And it happened. Okay. So we move along, and then we live in a world of more and more and more liberal environmentalists getting engaged, and now finding or thinking that they know more about inhumane practices than what, well, our cowboys do, our ranch breeders, our trainers, whatever the case may be. And so they're going to get out there, and they get in more and more into office, these liberal bureaucrats, and let's not do the name calling, but anyhow, individuals that really don't understand our ranching ways or understand, I use the example, perfect example. I had a governor here in South Dakota, female, that probably would have been Trump's running mate had she not wrote in her book that she had to shoot her dog.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
So, that mentality, or what the damage that did, of her being open and being honest, and what she would call common sense, that being a good steward of the if a dog's killing cats and calves and so forth, you got to make the tough decision and do what's right. Well, that's what happened with the Horse Protection Act that was written in 1970. As time went on, they didn't introduce legislators. They didn't introduce a new law. They just added to it. And the way that they did that was through the liberal agenda, in that we think, we've been to some rodeos, and the spurs or the flanks or any of those things, or horse shows. We go to horse shows, and they got a cinch on there, and they've got a little sweat and lather or whatever the case may, anything they could find, they thought, that's inhumane to that poor animal. It's okay to kill babies, human babies, but a little sweat on a horse, or if a horse scratches himself, or go to my production sale and I unload a trailer load of colts, and they might have, one of them maybe slipped and got down and got barked up. If they found scratches on legs, they basically had gotten new regulation added to an already existing bill that they could close my sale down, or they could close a horse show down, or they could close the rodeo down. Well, then there was some of the rodeo side of things, the PRCA and different ones, they went to bat and they fought the rodeo side and won. And so then they come back, the Biden administration, and they said, well, okay, rodeo's exempt, but 4-H horse shows, let's see, high school 4-H horse shows, they narrowed it down to a list of events. Didn't even make sense that, areas of competition where you're not going to see any soaring or any of those things, and yet they excluded horse races and rodeos. Didn't even make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it was supposed to take effect then. This new Horse Protection Act with added regulations was supposed to take effect February 1st. Well then, and this was done the new regulation adage was done in October. And so, you know what? Most of our senators and representatives didn't even know because it wasn't legislation. It was add-on regulation that the President Biden he had the executive order to do it, and he did it. Well, Biden, the same thing was approached back in 2017 when Trump was then in office, and when it got to his desk, when he seen this new regulation, because it was brought in with a proposal as executive order, he throwed it out the window. Well, as soon as Trump took office, and as soon as which was on the 21st of January, the AQHA was notified that any horse shows, this new regulation had been, was supposed to start on February 1st. Well, we got a hold of Sid Miller. We got a hold of Ronnie Jackson, who's a new legislator from Texas. We got a hold of our lobbyist, Ethan Lane, and their team in Washington, D.C., and said, this is stupid. This is supposed to start taking place February 1st. What can we do to, hopefully get this to Trump's desk, and hopefully he'll throw it out? Well, hasn't even had a chance. He's got a stack a mile long of stuff, already. He's addressing the things that, border security and all of those things that day by day. However, we did get his staff, his team, to put a halt on this until April 30th. And to give them now, the new administration, a chance to revisit this. And we're told, I just come from the NCBA convention where we share the same lobbyist, and we're told there that they're very confident that Trump will throw this one out as well. There'll still be the Horse Protection Act, yes, but it'll be in its original form. And all of this add-on stuff, Trump would have the ability, because it was added on in executive order, he would have the right to kick it off in executive order.
Well, and that's really what I was hoping to hear, is that the AQHA had been really active, and I knew that you guys had been. And for the listeners, just to kind of give a little bit more context, is these new regulations were obviously written by people who don't have any knowledge of the horse industry, and
bunch of bureaucrats.
It was going to be very difficult to implement anyway, but that's not their problem. Their problem is not the implementation. It's our problem. They have no idea, because how it reads is any horse show, sale, or exhibition. And
That's
so
correct.
that means anytime a horse is in public, they are under the guise of this law. And it outlawed using things like fly spray on a horse's legs.
That's correct.
And
Yes.
so as I read through the law, because that's what I did when I found out about it, is I just went to the government page and I read through it, and I'm not kidding, it took me 3 days to get through it.
Yeah.
Because the way
I
it's
think it was
written,
27 pages or something like that with you
and it's
from start to finish. The original one, yeah.
yeah, and as with most bureaucratic things, it's written in a very twisting, tangled way, and to try to really get to the root cause of it was very difficult. And so I actually was not that concerned, especially after the election. However, the grander, greater point to this is kind of the slippery slope theory of no one cares more for their animals than we who make our living doing it. And yes,
Right.
there was some issues with
Here's
others.
my own what I've come to, because I used to be so guilty of not engaging myself. Just like my dad, like my granddad, I'd rather just stay home on the creek and enjoy raising what I'm raising and not have to worry or mess with. We can't do that anymore, Kevin. We can't. If you're a breeder, if you're a trainer, if you're a if you're a family person, if you're a rancher, and in this case, a lot of people have called me, and still yet, what can I do? What can I do? Call your legislators, even though they're going to probably say, well, I think we're going to nip this in the bud probably. There's not a guarantee of that. But second, let your voice be heard in a professional way. But, hey, remind that legislator, remind that senator, state, federal, whatever level it is, that, we made a difference in this last election, finally, and I totally believe because there was more people that got off of the creek, went and voted and made their voice known. And if we don't do that in all these things, we can't stay home on the creek anymore. Or we're going to go right back to the same liberal agenda. We're going to be vulnerable. More importantly, our kids are going to be vulnerable. Mm-hmm. To the ways and means of people that don't know that are not good stewards of their land and livestock, because they don't know. It's their fuzzy belly feeling. Mm-hmm. There's a time that you gotta put your horse out of his misery. There's a time you gotta put their dog. They don't understand those. They're not, those aren't fun things that we have to, but they're reality. No. So anyhow, my advice to AQHA members when I get asked about this exact same issue is, yes, I feel really good that we're going to nip this one in the bud for 4 years, but please call your legislator, or if you see them, make mention to them, hey, for me, I call John Thune, or I call Dusty Johnson, or I call Mike Rounds, and I said, hey, I know you probably heard about this a lot, but please understand, this is how I feel. And please listen to me on this, and because it'll come up again. And I just want you to know where I stand as a breeder, as a taxpayer, as a family man. This is how I feel. And of course, naturally, they say, well, we're on the same page with you, whatever. And then I say, and as the president of the American Quarter Association, I can vouch for the majority of my membership that were, 240,000 members strong, 3,000 members in South Dakota. This is how they feel. And so they do listen. And, likewise, when people call, you guys, I need you, to voice up about issues in AQHA, let your voice be heard. Don't just wait for the quote unquote show people to get in there and interact and then get accused of being only ones because they do squeak, their wheels are usually the loudest. Well, we can't stay home on the creek anymore. we live in a too much of a demanding world, and we've got to, be professional. We've got to have our voices heard.
And right now, the iron is never going to be hotter as far as, strike while the iron is hot. Right now, we have the ears and the eyes of a very large populace because of shows like Yellowstone and some of the other shows, The Last Cowboy and stuff like that. So now's the time that we can do a lot of very good public relations and explaining. People are actually going to be interested in hearing what we have to say about our industry and our lifestyle.
Right. Well, the bottom line there is people that aren't ranch, cowboy, they want what we have.
Mm-hmm.
They want what we inherited. They want that Western connection. And yet, that's great. That's wonderful. But we just have to make sure that they're educated correctly in what reality is, and not every horse that comes out is going to live forever, and issues like that. And they need to be educated correctly. Yeah, it's great to be a cowboy, but you got to mark one out to qualify.
Yeah.
So
I've got 3 kind of real quick questions here to finish up. And again, thank you so much for the time. I think we could go on for a few hours talking because it's we have a lot of things in common. But real quick, what is the best piece of advice that you ever got that sticks with you, that you still use?
yes, very. Very, very simple. It's from my grandpa Alberto Francisco Lopez, and it's going to be regarding wealth and how you define wealth. And he said, "Kid," he said, "I want you to remember something." And he was not a money guy. He didn't care about money. He cared about horse papers, and he cared about being a good neighbor and so forth. He said, "You're a wealthy man if you got a good horse and a good neighbor. You can't be any richer. You got a good horse and a good neighbor." And he says, and you get a good horse by being a good steward, making a good horse, gaining his trust, and you'll make a good horse. And he says, and you'll make a good neighbor by being one. That was probably the best advice I've ever received.
That's very good advice. So tell me, what is going to be kind of a lasting memory of your years president of the AQHA, something that people might not expect?
I don't know if I can really answer what that'll be. I'll probably find that out in years to come, but I think I'm gonna say this. Probably I'm not a traditional corporate presidential type that like someone that would I have had a little bit of banking experience, so I do know kind of what is expected of leadership roles in some of those areas. But with the Corridor Association, what really makes the inner circle tick is the staff. And some of the past presidents just manage in a different style. And it was often brought up to me as advice from them, say, you take charge and you got limited time and you remember that those people work for you. That was not Jim Hunt's style. I never ever felt like any of the staff, 200 employees in that building worked for me. They worked with me and they were my friends. And I tried to make it a point to make each one of them feel special. And if I was, to go back, and I've been, told by most of them, many of them, they've appreciated. And I think that their performance in the AQHA, we've had less turnover in the last 2-3 years in the American Corridor Association than we've had in many years. And I'm not saying it's all because of that, but I've been told that they've appreciated that didn't make them feel like I was their boss, but I was their partner. And, again, it goes back to an example that my grandfather set by hiring a 10-year-old kid by the name of Casey Tibbs. He didn't treat him like a hired man. He treated him like a partner. And he became his partner. Mm-hmm. And he became a world champion. And he became a lifelong friend right up until my grandfather died. And then Casey continued to take me under his wing as a little kid. And I was in 2 films that he did in South Dakota. Not that has any merit or bearing, but it's the principle. It goes back to the same concept, Kevin. If you want a good neighbor, be one. Mm-hmm. You want a good friend, be one. You want a good partner, be one.
And final question, what does the horse mean to you?
The horse means to me to me, he was one of God's creation that I inherited through my heritage, my Western heritage, that my life lessons, my family, my wife, the reason, our common bond, our common interest, the things that we raised and taught our children, their lessons, it evolved around the lessons that we got from the horse. I really had no choice, because the quarter horse, the equine athlete, was what our ranch, our family, our values, our life lessons. That's what we grew up around, and that was our school teacher, was the horse.
Thank you for listening to the Mornings on Horseback podcast. You can always find us on Facebook and Instagram at Mance Creek Horses, or our website, mancecreekhorses.com. You can hear me Tuesday mornings at 8:26 on the Morning Show with Jake from the Cowboy State Daily, streaming at cowboystatedaily.com. Thank you to Wiley and the Wild West for our theme music, Tim Cox for our cover art, and Hoss Peterson for our intro. Keep on keeping on, pard. Until we get a chance to visit again, be a good neighbor and stay safe.
The hooves of the horses, witching and sweet, is the music earth steals from iron-shod feet. No whisper of a lover, no trilling of bird can stir me as hooves of the horses have stirred.